Hello guys, this is Minicoder coming back to you to bring you another beginner programmer tutorial on object orientation. This should be the third tutorial. So far we have talked through a few things in object orientation. We touched on abstract classes and inheritance. And if I can bring it up here real quick. I thought I already had it up. I apologize. Hold on one second. If we bring up this little window right here, just to recap, we had two classes, right? A animal class and a dog class. The animal class is a specific class, or I'm sorry, a generic class, also known as an abstract class. And we'll see that very soon when we start looking at actual writing the syntactical code. And then we had this other class called dog that is also known as a concrete class. And then we went on and we actually went as far as to say that this dog class actually specifically inherits from animal, which we then decided to say, well, if it inherits from animal, then it inherits all its actions or abilities, which in this case also happens to be properties. So that's where we left off. At this point I figured let's go start with Visual Studio. So if you haven't already, go to visualstudio.com. If you could just do Visual Studio Community, that is the free edition. If you have the opportunity to have Pro or Enterprise, that's great. You can get a 30-day trial. However, I think it's in the thousands. So if you're just starting out or you're an indie developer, you're much better off getting the Visual Studio Community. Quite honestly, I have Enterprise here because of the company I work for. However, I don't need for 90% of my job to use Enterprise. So most of the time, I use Community at home. So just as a a heads up, I don't see any reason not to use Community. Any plugins that used to be denied if you had the community version no longer exist. NuGet has so many products out there to download for free, which we'll go over NuGet some other time down the road about getting third-party open-sourced applications and when to do that. I have my reservations and my big pluses why I like to use them. So, without further ado, if you need to, pause the video right now and download the Visual Studio Community. I already have it on my computer, so I'm just going to fire it up. You can just do all the defaults. You don't need Xamarin or any of the other options it's probably going to give you, and then it'll pop up and it'll give you this nice little window. Now, I started making a simple method solution. However, I'm going to make a new one. So we're going to do a new project. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a console application. The console application is literally just like it sounds. It's the if you were to run your run command and type in CMD, you would see something similar to this. This is the command prompt or the console application. So whenever we have it output something or request information from the user, this will be our user interface for right now. We're not going to have fancy buttons or any of that stuff. That way the user interface doesn't get in the way of learning how to actually program. So that's that. So you'll want to hit Visual C#. You might have this all broken down to templates because everything's a template. So you click on template, you click on Visual C#. I'm sorry, I'm having little issues here talking. Console application. Now, you have a solution name, a name of the project, and a location of the project. What I would do is I'm going to do, let's see, I called it Simple Math before. So let's do, actually I'm going to make a YouTube's folder just to demo that as well. Oops. YouTube tutorial. Okay. And we will call this Simple method, because we're going to learn methods today. Simple method tut 3 for tutorial 3. Okay, and just for simplicity, let's call this tutorial 3. And we'll click OK. Okay, so let's close this so we can view what's going on here. So just so you know, any of these are customizable. You can pop them out if you want and put them somewhere else. Some people like one of the guys that work for me likes their Solution Explorer on their left hand side. I think they're crazy, but that's where they like it, so that's where they put it. So you can put it right there, and that's where I like it because we have Team Explorer, so I go here to do Team Viewer and a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway, I digress. So when you start a new project, you will have two things. You will have a project class library or collection, if you will, and that collection will be a collection of your references to other .NET things or libraries, which will make your life a lot easier, and I'll show you that as we go along. You have this app config that allows you to set certain settings on the fly for your application, so you don't have to rebuild it and redeploy it every single time you want to write code. Add something like maybe the name of a database changed. Well, if the database name changed, you very well may not want to change that and redeploy everything to all your employees or to the website and have it take it down. You could just go in the web config on the web and change it, and then if you need to, you can deploy that with the solution later. Then you'll have your program file. This is where everything starts. So by default, when you make a console app, it knows about this class called program. It knows to look for this name right after the keyword class. Now everything that's blue are keywords. Never call your classes the freaking keywords, because that causes a lot of problems. If you notice, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system here. Everything in .NET starts at the library system. I had somebody that worked for me many years ago that named a class system, and I slapped him upside the head and said, "You're stupid." Because you don't want to do that. Because as soon as you namespace something, which I'll explain namespacing in a little while, the same as something you know is very highly used, then you're asking for your Visual Studio to get very upset with you and confused. So that's my rant and that's my soapbox on that. Trust me, we'll talk about that at a later date when we do talk about namespacing. The next one is your static main method. This static main method, when you run your program, it is looking for inside the program class this method with this name and with this parameter signature. This allows you to pass in through the console if you were to call simple method tut3.exe, which gets built once you build the project, which I'll show you when things get built. It'll show you it'll show you you can put in arguments, and then whatever you use the arguments for here, and then spit back or console out, because this is void, so you're not going to spit something back. But if you console something out, it might use those arguments with it. So I'm not going to go over args that much, all that much, because this is very rarely used, so just trust me on it. In fact, let's just build the project right now. So if we build or rebuild, either one is fine. I'll go into what each one does at some other date. So we build, we open in the folder, let me bring this over here. So we have this bin folder. Inside this bin folder is debug. You get that debug because of this. This tells it what your configuration is. You have a debug and a release. The debug has these things called PDB files, and those PDB files are used to allow you to debug at a later date. It also degrades performance to a degree, and there's a lot of science and articles out there about whether or not it's significant enough to not have the PDB files there. I tend to switch it to release, and I have a release more optimized code. I deal a lot more on web these days, so any cycles I can buy, I'm a happy camper with. So don't concern yourself with these right here. This is your application, this is your executable, and then the actually I'm sorry, this is the configuration file for it. So let's actually open that up. So that's your app config. So if you look, it's exec.config. I just don't I redid my computer recently and didn't tell it to show everything. This is your actual application, so if you were to run it, you couldn't see it, but it would the black screen console popped up and closed right away because we didn't give it any information. We didn't have it do anything. So this gives you an idea of what's going on. Let's see here. Properties. Properties gives you assembly info for like what version it is, what you're doing with it. This is your project file. So within your project file, it's a whole bunch of scary stuff, but in a nutshell, it loads everything. It tells the project what it needs to load. So all these references right here you saw in those usings that I showed you, that it needs to the project you're building when it's built or while it's building that executable, it needs to know what to include. Same thing with compile. We're going to compile this program.css file I showed you and the assembly info file, because if you ever go and let's say this is a bad example, but just because we're in here, but if you ever go to previous versions here, details here, there's usually a date created, and under certain circumstances, if it knows it's a project or an application, it may also have a version number. That's how you know how you can set your versions for each time that you change your application, either drastically or with a bug. Up here just tells you it's going to be executable. Here's your root namespace and the assembly name. We haven't gone over namespaces yet. Any CPU is typically what you want, unless you're targeting x86 or x64-bit. And then this is where the executable is going to be pushed out to, and this says that it can either trace or debug, which are two different levels of logging. So that concludes most of the options within your project file. And then the only other thing that's in there, actually probably be easier. My computer's locking up for a second here. Hold on. It would probably be easier just to open it up right here. So this is the program.cs. So unfortunately this ran a little over, so this ended up being more of a Visual Studio tutorial. I apologize for that. In the next tutorial, for sure, we're going to go over the methods and how they interact with everything. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I apologize, it's a little long. It's 14 minutes and change, and I do apologize that we didn't go over methods, but I will title this Intro to Visual Studios, just because that's really what we ended up doing. So have a great night. I'm probably going to record one just right after this while I'm here, so shortly after this one's done, the next one will be done. So have a great night, and I will see you guys soon. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you liked it.